The Greek Spanakopita is a savory spinach, egg, and cheese pie with layers of flaky phyllo crust. The recipe I'm sharing includes spinach, feta, eggs, leek, parsley, dill, nutmeg, and my homemade phyllo dough. This tasty pie makes a great snack, a main course with a side salad or soup for lunch, or a side item with lamb or kabobs for dinner. Spanakopita is a signature dish from Greece. However, the recipe varies throughout the country. During vegan-type religious fasts, cheese and eggs are eliminated. While Spanakopita's origins are unknown, it's been enjoyed for the past 400 years. Let's check out my version, which is a combination of the ingredients from the different regions of Greece. For the ingredients, you'll need spinach, leek, parsley, dill, salt, black pepper, nutmeg, extra virgin olive oil, eggs, feta cheese, and phyllo sheets, either store-bought or homemade. Spanakopita is not difficult to make, so let's go ahead and preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and you're going to prepare a 9 by 13 inch baking dish by brushing the bottom and the sides with some extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is the main fat in this dish, and so I tend to like to grease my dishes with whatever the main fat is. And then set your pan aside. We'll prep and chop the veggies first. So for ease, I prefer to use thawed frozen spinach, but you could use fresh spinach. You just have to do the extra step of sauteing it, rinsing it, and draining it, etc., which you don't have to do with the frozen as long as it's thawed. So if you're using thawed from frozen, then you're gonna need 2 12-ounce bags or 1 24-ounce bag, whatever you can find. And then we're going to just drain it and squeeze it in a strainer. I usually just over a sink, I'll do this for you over a bowl, but just squeeze a spinach just to release the juice, the water, and just let it drain in the bowl. So we want to make sure to get the liquid out as much as we can because we don't want this to be so moist that it softens up our phyllo dough crust. So just squeeze out as much as you can and don't worry about the rest because we are going to put it on the skillet and that'll release a lot more of the juice. Okay, then I'm just going to discard the juice. You could, of course, I suppose, use it for your smoothie in the morning. That'd make a nice healthy use of those nutrients we just lost. And then just set your spinach aside. Okay, and then we're going to use 1 leek, and we're using the green and white parts only. Why I like leek in this recipe is you could, of course, use onions, but a leek is a milder flavor than onion, and because it's a delicate dish in a sense, so I like to use that a milder onion, but you still get great flavor from it. But you can always use an onion if you don't have leek or you don't want to buy it. So just do a quick little chop. Once you chop it, then you want to rinse it off. That's, I found, the easiest because leek harbors all those little sandy bits from the ground. And so if you can chop it first, then you're loosening up all those tight leaves. And so it makes it easier to rinse. I'm going to give this just a quick rinse to release all the dirt. I'm going to leave my leek in the sink to let it drain. And then we're going to cut up our herbs. I like to use parsley and dill. I love dill with spinach. And then of course parsley goes well with spinach as well. And these are commonly used in different regions of Greece. So for dill, I'm just using 1 package, like around a 6-ounce package. And you can just do just a quick little rough chop. And I'm just using the whole thing, including the stems. The stems will break down anyway, so you won't even notice them. So then just set that aside. I'm just going to put mine in a bowl. And then we want about 1 cup of a flat leaf parsley. I like to store my parsley in a glass like I would flowers because parsley is a leaf and you treat it like you would a flower. You could cut the stems off, you could leave the stems, it's up to you. But you want a good handful to equal about a cup, and then just give that a good chop. If you store leafy herbs in a glass with water, they'll last you 2 and 3 weeks. In fact, I've had this cup for 2 weeks now, and notice, look how crispy they look. We'll add our parsley to the dill. So now our veggies are cut and ready to go, so now we need to saute our leek. We want to heat our skillet on medium-high heat. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the pan. That's about 1. That's about 2. We're going to let the olive oil heat up. You know your pan has heated enough when you can add a piece of leek and it sizzles in the pan, which it is doing. So now go ahead and add your leek. Allow the leek to saute in the oil for just a couple of minutes until it softens. So now we're going to add our spinach. Put all of it in the pan. Use your spatula and break up the spinach. Okay, stir it with the leek. So we're going to cook these two together until the spinach is heated through and all the liquid has evaporated, if there is any, and ours is a pretty dry pan. Go ahead and remove your spinach and leek mixture from the hot burner, and we're going to add in our parsley and dill. And the heat from the spinach and the leek will wilt the parsley and dill, and then just stir these until well combined. We're going to place our mixture into a large mixing bowl. And we're going to set this aside for 10 minutes to cool a little, because we're going to add eggs to this and we don't want the eggs to cook yet. To our cold spinach mixture, we're going to stir in a half a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper, and I used fresh nutmeg. I just grated it myself, and we're going to put in about a quarter teaspoon of that. Nutmeg and spinach and egg go very well together. Mix it up well. We're going to add in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Add a little bit of moisture, that's not water. And 3 beaten eggs. Give it a quick little stir, mix up, pour it into your spinach, and then just repeat. All right, so mix up all these ingredients now. So the egg will give a little bit of height. It also adds a little bit of protein to a rather vegetable pie. Okay, so then the last ingredient we add is, this is 7 ounces of feta cheese. If you have 8 ounces, it's whatever the block is that you buy at the store. Mine is 7 ounces. So we're just gonna crumble that over the spinach. Feta is definitely Greek, so this is the sort of quintessential cheese to use. And another quick stir. 1 stir, just set it aside. In a small bowl, go ahead and pour in about 3/4 of a cup of olive oil, and you will use most, if not all of it. And then set that near your work surface. Have your greased baking pan aside. And now that our ingredients are all ready to go, now we can unwrap and unroll our phyllo sheets. So you can use store-bought or homemade. I'm using my homemade phyllo here, and you can see the link in the description for my homemade version. But whatever you use, I like to unroll mine, put it on a cookie sheet, and then keep the top wrapped, because these will start to dry out. You can see my homemade here is pretty flimsy. It'll dry out just like a store-bought version. So just keep them covered and keep them nearby. So I put them on a cookie sheet so I can move a cookie sheet around the kitchen as I need to. So I'm actually gonna place mine beside me so that I can easily get to it. And make sure you keep your phyllo covered. You can use, I've got actually a piece of wax paper on top, but I want to cover it just a little bit more. So I'm going to add a towel to it as well. All right, so go ahead and remove the top phyllo sheet and place it on your work surface. And then cover the remaining sheets up. Now you can see I'm using my homemade version. It is a little bit thicker than a store-bought, because homemade is typically used as a rolling pin, and you just cannot get dough thin enough to like you can with a machine from a store-bought version. But they're both acceptable to use as pie crusts or in any kind of a phyllo making recipe that you're doing. So then take your phyllo dough, the first one that you have. We're going to lightly brush our phyllo dough with olive oil all around, because it's the oil that causes the phyllo to become crispy in the oven. And if you're doing baklava using phyllo sheets, then it's the butter that you typically put on it that makes it crispy. It's basically the fat. Then we're gonna place it in our pan. So we're gonna add a couple of sheets. So you wanna add your dough, first dough sheet, to where it overhangs by a couple of inches over the edge of your dish. And you want to press it down along the edges, and we're going to double up here so that we'll have enough dough overhanging. So now we're going to repeat the same process with the second one, and you're just going to add olive oil to it again. Brush it really well. You only have to brush one side. Okay, and we're going to repeat on the other side. Going to add to where it overhangs. We're creating sort of a double crust underneath it. So that's what it should look like, right? So we're going to repeat with another 2 sheets, And it's just, these are just going to overlap the two that we've already placed in the pie plate. So just repeating the same process, brushing them well with olive oil. So I have 4 phyllo sheets here, 2 of them on one side and 2 on the other. They're overlapping and they're all hanging over the edges. If you are using store-bought phyllo dough sheets, then you need to add another 2 layers to equal 8 sheets. I have 4 sheets from homemade. You're going to need 8 sheets from store-bought, and that is because store-bought sheets are thinner due to the machine rolling, and homemade sheets using a rolling pin equals 2 store-bought sheets. So just keep that in mind. You can interchange them, just keep in mind the difference in thickness. And we're going to place that mixture into our phyllo dough sheets. Just spread it evenly through the pan. Okay, so then we're going to repeat the process of adding another 2 sets of phyllo dough, just like we did before. So add a coating of oil. Okay, overlap it. Place it over the top of your spinach so that it overlaps again over the edge of the pan, and repeat. Don't worry if you rip your dough like I just did. It's layered in your pan anyway. You know what? I've got 1 extra thin sheet left over. I think I'm just going to add it to the top. That's the thing about phyllo dough. It's so thin. You get out more if you want. All right, if you are using store-bought phyllo dough, you need to add another 4 sheets. So you're going to have a total of 8 sheets on bottom and 8 sheets on top for store-bought. If it's homemade, you're going to have a total of 4 sheets on bottom and 4 sheets on top. Now I like to go around and just make sure my edges are brushed well because we don't want them to dry out. To finish the pie, all we have to do is fold in the overhanging edges. So I like to start in a corner and just start rolling it up and then turning it in. And this is creating the crust for your pie. Now let me tell you, this phyllo dough tastes really good. We love the edges of the spinach pie because that crust is pretty tasty. See, notice how it rolls in nice and neat. And that's a lot of dough there too. Okay, and that's really all you need to do. I don't think you need to do anything else. You could decorate the edges if you want as far as trying to crimp the edges, but it's not necessary. So I think that actually is just a pretty pie as is. So then take your olive oil and just want to do a good, generous brushing along the top of your dough because it is dry because it was on the outside. And then just sort of look and see that everything is covered. Everything is moistened. Okay, let's go ahead and score this into serving pieces. It'll make it easier when it comes out of the oven to cut it since the top will be crispy. So I like to get 12 servings out of this 9 by 13 pan. So all you want to do is score the dough, and you don't want to cut all the way through. You're just going to score where you know you're going to cut for your pieces. Okay, so that gives us 4 rows down, so then we're just going to go 3 across. There you have it. So basically it's the dough that's cut, nothing else. Place your Spanakopita in the oven. It's preheated and we're gonna bake for 45 minutes to an hour. So just check on it. The top should be golden brown. It should look crispy and crunchy and you should see it flaking at the top. Spanakopita is hot right out of the oven. So now we need to cut the pieces completely where they're scored so that steam can escape. You can hear that crunchy crust. You could theoretically eat this now, but it's recommended that you wait until it cools a little bit down, more so to room temperature. And because it has egg in it, like a quiche, it will shrink just a bit as it sits, allowing the steam to escape through the cuts will keep the crust on the bottom from being soggy. We'll let this cool for about an hour and then we'll take a look on the inside. Notice our rolled top edges. You can even hear they're hard and crispy and crunchy, which is what phyllo dough does. Notice that as it's cooled and the spinach has shrunk a little bit, you've got the flaps from the top layer of phyllo. Okay, it comes out of the pan very easily. I love the bright green from the spinach. You can see the chunks of cheese and even some of the leek. And the layers on the bottom, it's nice and brown. The cheese adds saltiness and flavor. The herbs add depth and freshness. And of course, the crunchy olive oil crust adds additional richness, texture, and flavor to the overall dish. And as I cut more into the slice, you can hear the crispy crunch of the phyllo dough. Notice the rolls of the edge there from where we rolled it over into the pan. It's a nice looking spinach pie. Spanakopita is best eaten the day it's made because the phyllo crust softens in the fridge from the filling moisture. For a time saver, you can make and assemble the spanakopita the day before you want to bake and eat it. Once it's baked though, store it covered in the fridge for several days or longer in the freezer. Keep in mind the crust will soften, but the flavors are still really good. While Greek spanakopita consists mainly of vegetables, the hearty olive oil crust, eggs, and cheese round it out to create a very satisfying snack or meal. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing. Until next time, go bake the world.